the world of Lysara. In the realm of Lysara, where the sky shimmered with the iridescent glow of floating islands and the air hummed with the whispers of ancient magic, life was a delicate dance between the extraordinary and the mundane. Magic was not an anomaly but a constant woven into the fabric of daily existence. From the bustling markets of Varelli, where merchants sold potions that could turn hair silver or make a person speak in riddles, to the quiet libraries of Eldrin, where books whispered secrets to those who dared to listen, the people of Lysara had long since accepted the surreal as part of the ordinary. Yet for all its wonders, Lysara was not a place of unending harmony. It was a world of contradictions, where the line between order and chaos was as thin as the pages of an unwritten story. At the heart of this world was Elira, a woman whose life had been shaped by a single, devastating mistake. Once a respected scribe in the grand archives of Eldrin, she had been tasked with cataloging the histories of Lysara's most powerful families. Her work had been meticulous, her records precise, until the day she had made an error that no one could undo. A misplaced name in a crucial document had led to the ruin of an entire lineage, a misstep that had cost her position, her reputation, and her place in the world she had once called home. Now, she lived in the shadows of Varel, a place where the forgotten and the disgraced found solace in the company of those who had been cast aside. Was here, among the outcasts and the lost, that Elira found herself, her days spent in the dim glow of candlelight, her nights haunted by the echoes of the past. Though the people of Lysara had long since accepted the absurd, Elira had not. She had learned to live with the weight of her mistake, but she had never stopped searching for a way to make amends. It was in this state of restless solitude that her story would begin, a tale of redemption, of discovery, and of the unexpected bonds that would shape her life in ways she had never imagined. The letter from the unknown one evening, as the last of the sun's light bled into the horizon and the city of Varel was bathed in the eerie glow of its floating lanterns, Elira found herself in the corner like her story would begin, a tale of redemption, of discovery, and of the unexpected bonds that would shape her life in ways she had never imagined. Of a dimly lit tavern, nursing a cup of lukewarm ale. The place was a refuge for those who had been cast aside, a gathering of the forgotten and the disgraced. She had come here often, hoping to drown the weight of her past in the company of others who understood the burden of being out of place. But on this night something different happened. A letter, sealed with an unfamiliar insignia, was placed on the table before her. It was not delivered by a server or a fellow patron, but simply appeared, as if conjured from the very air. Elira frowned, her fingers hesitating over the wax seal. She had received many strange things in her time, but this was different. The seal bore no name, only an intricate pattern that seemed to shift and rearrange itself when beat. A strange mixture of hope and unease settled over her. She had spent years believing that her mistake had sealed her fate, that there was no way to undo what had been done. And yet, here was a letter, as if sent by some unseen force, offering her a chance to begin again. The thought of returning to Eldrin, of stepping back into the world she had once called home, was both exhilarating and terrifying. She had spent so long in the shadows, hiding from the past, that the idea of facing it again felt like stepping into the unknown. But something about the letter, the way it had appeared, the way it spoke to her as if it had known her for years, made her feel as though she had no choice. The tavern, and made her way through the winding streets of Varel, her heart pounding with the weight of the decision before her. She had always thought that her story had ended the day she made her mistake, but now, it seemed, it was only beginning. As she approached the library of Eldrin, she felt the air shift around her, as if the city itself was watching, waiting. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Elira felt something she had not felt in a long time: possibility. A curtain of ivy that had long since taken root in the cracks of the stone. As she stepped inside, the air was thick with the scent of old parchment and dust, the silence broken only by the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards beneath her feet. The library was vast, its towering shelves stretching into the darkness above. Unlike the orderly, meticulously catalogued archives of her past, this place was a labyrinth of books that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves when she looked away. Some tomes pulsed with a faint golden light, while others lay in complete disarray, their pages fluttering as if caught in an unseen wind. The very air seemed to hum with an energy that was neither magical nor mundane, but something in between. The Lyra moved cautiously, her fingers trailing along the spines. The silence rearranged themselves when she looked away. Of the books, as she searched for something, anything, that might explain the letter's cryptic message, She had expected to find records of lost histories or forgotten stories, but what she found was something far stranger. At the center of the library, beneath a great arched doorway, was a single, unmarked book. It was bound in dark leather, its cover unadorned, its pages thick and brittle. Unlike the other tomes, this one did not seem to be part of the library's collection. It was as if it had been placed here deliberately, waiting for her. With a hesitant breath, she opened the book. The pages were filled with names, hundreds of them, written in a script that was both familiar and alien. Some of the names were ones she recognized, others were entirely unknown. As she read, a strange feeling settled over her, as though the names were not just words on a page, but echoes of lives that had been lost to time. And then, at the very bottom of the final page, she found her own name. Elira's breath caught in her throat. Her mistake had not been erased from the records of Lysara. It had been noted, recorded, and preserved. But why? And more importantly, who had written it? Before she could answer these questions, a voice spoke from the shadows. "You're not supposed to be here!" Elira spun around, her heart pounding. Standing at the edge of the room was a man, his face partially obscured by the dim light. He was tall, his posture rigid, his eyes sharp and calculating. He wore a tattered cloak, its edges frayed and worn, and though he was not dressed like a scholar, there was something about him that suggested he had once been something more. "You're Elira," he said, stepping forward. "I was told you would come." She hesitated. "Who are you?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he gestured toward the book in her hands. "That book is not for you to read. It's not for anyone to read. It's a record of the unwritten, those who were never meant to be remembered." Elira frowned. "What does that mean?" The man's expression darkened. "It means that you're not the only one who has made a mistake, and that you're not the only one who has made a mistake, and that you're not the only one who has been forgotten." As he spoke, the shadows around them seemed to shift. Elira frowned. But what she found was something far more complicated, and for the first time in years, she was not alone. The arrival of the unlikely family. As the man's words settled in the air, a sudden gust of wind swept through the library, rustling the pages of the books and sending a few loose ones tumbling to the floor. Elira barely had time to react before the shadows around her deepened, and from the darkness emerged three figures, each stepping forward with a distinct air of purpose. The first was a woman with sharp, angular features and a gaze that seemed to pierce through the fabric of the world. Her dark hair was braided in intricate patterns, and she wore a tattered cloak similar to the man's, though her own was adorned with faded symbols that shimmered faintly. As the man's words settled in the air, sceptering with a distinct air of purpose. In the dim light, she carried a small, ornate dagger at her hip, its hilt carved with runes that pulsed with a soft blue glow. "I'm Kale," she said, her voice steady, though her eyes flickered with something unreadable. "I was told you would be here." The second figure was a boy, no older than 12, with a wild mop of auburn hair and eyes that were far too old for his age. He wore a patchwork tunic, its fabric stitched together from remnants of various garments, and a belt of leather straps that held an assortment of small, odd objects, some of which glowed faintly, others that hummed with a strange, metallic resonance. He looked up at Elira with an expression that was equal parts curiosity and wariness. "I'm Kale," she said, his voice high-pitched but filled. "It's dry," with an unexpected confidence. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." The third was a man with a lanky frame and a face that seemed to be in constant motion, as though he were always laughing or frowning, but never quite settling on one emotion. His clothes were mismatched, a patchwork of different fabrics and colors, and he carried a satchel slung over his shoulder, its straps frayed and worn. He had a mischievous grin on his face, and the moment he saw Elira, he let out a low chuckle. "I'm Tarek," he said, his voice rich with amusement. "I was hoping you'd come. I've been waiting for this for a while." Elira blinked, caught off guard by the sudden arrival of the three strangers. She had expected to be alone in this place, to face the summoning and, the weight of her past in solitude. But now, standing before her were these three, each of them seemingly connected to the library in some way. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease that had taken root in her chest. Kale crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "We're the ones who were left behind, the ones who were never meant to be remembered." Elira frowned. "That sounds like something the book said." Mira tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You read it?" Elira nodded. "I found it. It had my name in it." Tarek let out a low whistle. "Well, that's a start." Kale's expression darkened. "We need to talk. You're not the only one who's been forgotten." Elira hesitated. She had spent years believing that her mistake had sealed her fate, that she was alone in the world. But now, standing before her were three people who seemed to understand her in a way no one else had. She looked at Kale, then at Mira and Tarek, and for the first time in years, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Hope! The journey through Lysara! The group set off from the library of Eldrin under the cover of darkness, their path uncertain but their purpose clear. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and old parchment, and the moonlight cast long, shifting shadows across the uneven ground. Elira walked between Kale and Tarek, her fingers tightening around the strap of her satchel, while Mira, ever curious, darted ahead, pausing to examine strange markings on the trees or to listen intently to the rustling of unseen creatures in the underbrush. The journey took them through the outskirts of Varel, where the city's glow faded into the darkness of the surrounding forest. The trees here were taller than those in the city, their trunks twisted and gnarled as though they had been shaped by some unseen force. Strange lights flickered between the branches, and the air was filled with the low hum of unseen voices. "Do you hear that?" Mira asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Elira nodded. It was not the sound of wind or the rustling of leaves, but something deeper, something that felt as though it were speaking directly to them. Kale's jaw tightened. "We're not alone." Tarek let out a low chuckle. "That's not exactly reassuring." Elira felt a flicker of unease. She had spent years in the shadows, hiding from the world, but now she was walking to a place that felt more alive than any city she had ever known. It was as if the forest itself was watching them, waiting. They pressed on, the trees growing denser, the path more treacherous. At one point, they came upon a clearing where the ground was covered in silver-blue moss that glowed faintly in the moonlight. In the center of the clearing stood a tree unlike any Elira had ever seen. Its trunk was covered in intricate carvings, and its branches stretched out like the arms of a giant. "This is the Tree of Echoes," Kale said, her voice quiet but firm. "It remembers everything that has ever passed through this place." Mira stepped forward, his eyes wide with wonder. "Can it talk?" Kale shook her head. "It doesn't need to. It listens." Elira hesitated before stepping closer to the tree. The moment she did, the air around her shifted, and a voice, soft, ancient, and filled with the weight of forgotten stories, spoke to her. "You carry the burden of the unwritten," the voice said, "but you are not alone." Elira's breath caught in her throat. She looked around, but the others were watching her, their expressions unreadable. Kale stepped forward, her voice steady. "What does it mean?" The voice did not answer immediately. Instead, it seemed to hum with the weight of unspoken words, and then slowly, it listens. "It listens! What the garden?" A strange sense of relief washed over her. She had spent years believing that her mistake had sealed her fate, but now, standing before this ancient tree, she felt as though something had changed. Tarek let out a low whistle. Well, that was cryptic. Kale's expression was unreadable. "We need to keep moving." Elira nodded, though her heart was still racing. The journey had only just begun, and already she was beginning to understand that she was not the only one who had been forgotten. She was not the only one who had been forgotten. She was not the only one who had been cast aside. And for the first time in years, she was not alone. The confrontation of the unwritten. The forest around them grew darker as they pressed forward, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and the distant sound of trigut. She was beginning to understand that she was not the only one who had been forgotten. She was not the only one who had been cast aside. Something moving through the underbrush. Elira's pulse quickened as they approached the edge of a vast clearing where the trees stood in perfect symmetry, their trunks twisted in unnatural shapes. At the center of the clearing, a great stone archway loomed, its surface covered in the same intricate carvings as the Tree of Echoes. Kale's hand drifted to the hilt of her dagger.
"This is it!"
Elira swallowed hard.
"What is it?"
Tarek let out a low chuckle, though there was no humor in his voice.
"The place where the unwritten are kept."
Mira's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "Are they? Still here?" Kale's expression darkened.
"They are!"
Figures began to emerge. They were not human, not in the way Elira had ever seen. Their forms were hazy, as though they were caught between existence and oblivion, their eyes hollow voids that seemed to drink in the light. Elira took a step back, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "What are they?" Kale's voice was steady, though her grip on her dagger tightened. "They are the unwritten, the ones who were never meant to be remembered." One of the figures stepped forward, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. It raised a hand, and the air around them seemed to pulse with an unseen force. Elira felt a sudden weight press against her chest, as though the very fabric of reality was being pulled apart. Tarek let out a sharp curse. "There!" Trying to pull us in, Kale moved quickly, drawing her dagger and slashing through the air. The blade left a faint golden trail in its wake, and the figure recoiled slightly, its form flickering. "We can't let them take us!" Mira's eyes widened. "What do we do?" Elira's mind raced. She had spent years believing that she was alone in the world, that her mistake had sealed her fate. But now, standing before these figures, she realized that she was not the only one who had been forgotten. She was not the only one who had been forgotten. She was not the only one who had been cast aside. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. "We fight back!" Kale's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "You can't just fight them. They're not like the others." Elira met her gaze. "Then we do what?" "We have to." Tarek let out a low whistle. "Well, that's a bold move." Elira turned to the others, her voice steady. "We have to find a way to break their hold on this place. If they are the unwritten, then they must have been written into existence by someone. We need to find out who." Kale's expression hardened. "And if we can't?" Elira looked at her, her resolve unshaken. "Then we fight them anyway." The figures around them let out a low, guttural sound, and the air grew heavier. The battle had begun. The reckoning of names. The air in the clearing grew heavier, the weight of the Unwritten pressing down on them like a storm on the horizon. Elira felt the pull of the figures around her, their presence an unrelenting force. "Then we fight them anyway!" That threatened to consume her, but she did not falter. She had spent years believing that she was alone in the world, that her mistake had sealed her fate. But now, standing before these figures, she realized that she was not the only one who had been forgotten. She was not the only one who had been cast aside. And for the first time in years, she was not alone. Kale moved first, her dagger flashing in the dim light as she slashed through the air, the golden trail of her blade cutting through the darkness. The figures recoiled, their forms flickering like candle flames in the wind. Tarek let out a sharp whistle, his satchel swinging from his shoulder as he reached inside, pulling out a small, glowing orb. With a flick of his wrist, the orb burst, her dagger flashing in the dim light as she slashed through the air, the golden trail of her blade cutting through the darkness. The figures recoiled, their forms flickering like candle flames in the wind, into a cascade of light, illuminating the clearing in a way that made the figures waver. Mira, ever the curious one, stepped forward, his small hands moving in quick, precise gestures. The air around him shimmered, and for a moment the figures seemed to hesitate. "They're not just shadows," he murmured. "They're echoes of something that was never written." Elira's heart pounded in her chest. She had spent years believing that her mistake had been the end of her story, that she had been erased from the world. But now, standing before these figures, she saw the truth. They were not enemies. They were the unwritten, the forgotten, the ones who had been cast aside by the very system that had once governed their lives. She took a step forward, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "You were never meant to be forgotten." The figures around her shifted, their hollow eyes flickering with something that almost resembled recognition. The air in the clearing grew still, and for the first time since they had arrived, the figures did not move. Kael's grip on her dagger loosened slightly. "What are you doing?" Elira turned to her, her expression resolute. "We're not here to fight them. We're here to remember them." Mira's eyes widened. "You can't just—" Elira raised a hand, silencing him. "They were written into existence, but they were never meant to be remembered. That's why they're here. That's why they're forgotten." Tarek let out a low whistle. "So what do we do about that?" Elira looked around at the figures, at the others who had been cast aside, and she knew. "We rewrite their names." Kael's expression darkened. "You can't just—" Elira met her gaze, her voice unwavering. "We can. We have to." The figures around them shifted again, their forms flickering as though they were on the verge of dissolving into the air. The clearing was silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on them all. Elira took a deep breath, then stepped forward. She reached into her satchel, pulling out the book she had found in the library. The pages were still there, the names of the unwritten, still written in the same ancient script. She opened it, her fingers trembling slightly as she traced the lines of the text. Kael stepped beside her, her voice quiet but firm.
Yell.
Then at Mira and Tarek. "I don't have to." She turned back to the book, her eyes scanning the names, and then slowly she began to write. The air around them shifted, the figures flickering with a new intensity. The book in her hands pulsed with a strange energy, the ink on the pages glowing faintly. The names she wrote did not fade, they did not disappear, they remained solid, real, as though they had never been forgotten. Kael stepped forward, her dagger still in her hand, but her expression had changed. "What are you doing?" Elira looked up at her, her voice steady. "We're giving them back their names." The figures around them let out a low, guttural sound, and the air in the clearing seemed to hum with the weight of their presence. The book in Elira's hands glowed brighter, the names she had written now taking shape, forming into something real, something whole. And then, slowly, the figures around them began to change. Their forms no longer flickered, no longer wavered. They stood tall, solid, as though they had finally been given something they had never had before. Kael's breath caught in her throat. "There! Real!" Elira looked around at the figures, at the others who had been cast aside, and she felt something shift within her. She had spent years believing that she was alone in the world, that her mistake had sealed her fate. But now, standing before these figures, she realized that she was not the only one who had been forgotten. She was not the only one who had been cast aside. And there! For the first time in years, she was not alone, the bonds that define us. As the figures of the unwritten stood tall and solid, the air in the clearing felt lighter, as though the weight of their forgotten existence had been lifted. The book in Elira's hands no longer pulsed with energy, its pages now filled with names that had been reclaimed, restored, and given meaning. She looked around at Kyle, Mira, and Tarek, their expressions a mixture of awe and understanding. They had come together not by chance, but by necessity, each of them carrying their own burdens, their own mistakes, their own forgotten stories. And now, standing in this clearing, they were no longer alone. Kyle was the first to speak, her voice steady but filled with something new, something that had not been there before. "We did it." Elira nodded, her heart still racing. We did. Mira let out a breath, his small hands still trembling slightly. I didn't think we could do that. Tarek chuckled, though there was no humor in his voice. We did, and I think we changed something. Elira looked around at the figures of the Unwritten, now standing with purpose, no longer shadows of forgotten lives. She had spent years believing that her mistake had sealed her fate, that she was alone in the world. But now she saw that she had been wrong. She was not the only one who had been cast aside. She was not the only one who had been forgotten. She looked at Kyle, at Mira, at Tarek, and for the first time in years, she felt something she had not felt in a long time: belonging. Kale stepped forward, her gaze steady. We're not just a group of people who found each other by accident. We're something else now. Elira met her gaze. We're family. Mira's eyes widened slightly, and for a moment he looked as though he were about to argue, but then he nodded, his expression softening. Yeah, I guess we are. Tarek let out a low whistle. Well, that's a change of pace. Elira smiled, though there was a bittersweet edge to it. They had come together in the shadows, each of them carrying their own burdens, their own stories, and now they had found something that had been missing from their lives' connection. Kale turned to the figures of the Unwritten, her voice quiet but firm. You were never meant to be forgotten, and now you won't be. The figures around them did not speak, but they did not need to. They had been given something they had never had before: names, purpose, a place in the world. Elira looked around at her companions, at the people who had become her family, and she felt something shift within her. She had spent so long believing that her mistake had defined her, that she was the only one who had been cast aside. But now she saw that she was not the only one, and for the first time in years, she was not alone. She was part of something greater than herself, and that she was part of something greater than herself, and that, she realized, was the most important thing of all. The echoes of Lysara Elira stirred at the edge of the clearing, watching as the figures of the Unwritten stood tall, no longer flickering like shadows caught between existence and oblivion. The air was still, the weight of the moment pressing down on her, and for the first time in years, she felt something she had long thought lost. Peace. The library of Eldrin had been a place of forgotten names, of stories that had been erased from the world. But now, those names had been reclaimed, their echoes no longer lost to time. She had spent years believing that her mistake had sealed her fate, that she was alone in the world. But standing here, with KL, Mira, and Tarek by her side, she realized that she had been wrong. She was not alone. She had found a family, not by blood, but by choice. They had come together not because of fate, but because of necessity, because of the shared understanding that they had all been cast aside, that they had all been forgotten, and yet they had found each other, had formed something that had not existed before. The world of Lysara was a strange, absurd place, where magic was as common as the air, and where the line between reality and illusion was as thin as the pages of an unwritten book. But in that absurdity, in that chaos, something had been made possible. Elira looked down at the book in her hands, its pages now filled with names that had once been lost to time. She had spent years believing that she was the only one who had been forgotten, that her mistake had sealed her fate. But now she saw the truth. She was not the only one who had been cast aside, and for the first time in years, she was not alone. Do not forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more stories. Hit the notification bell to be notified of new stories when they become available. Feel free to leave a comment and tell me if you enjoyed the story and want to hear more like it.